Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Marcus Hanscom. I'm the Director of Graduate Admission here at Roger Williams, and I'm joined by Dr. Alejandro Leguizamo. He's our Associate Professor and Program Director for the two programs that we offer in forensic psychology. So thank you so much for joining us. I know a few of you we met on the road in the fall, so thank you for connecting with us further. That's exciting to see you with us. And if you have any questions throughout the session, if you're on a mobile device, there's a questions box at the, I believe, the lower part of your mobile device that you can tap on and ask your questions. Or if you're on a desktop, you'll see on the right-hand side in your panel, you can click on questions and ask your questions there. So we're happy to answer questions as we go along, and also we'll take some time toward the end. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Leguizamo, and then we'll talk later. I'll come back and talk more about the admission process and financial aid and other things. So Dr. Leguizamo.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Very excited to tell you about our master's programs. And I'll start by telling you that they are offered in our main campus, which is in Bristol, Rhode Island. If you're not familiar with the area, I recommend that you Google it in order to see what the place is like. It is truly beautiful, perhaps not in the middle of the winter, but the rest of the time it's truly beautiful. So we have two programs, a master's in forensic and legal psychology, and this is a 45-credit program that is designed to prepare students for doctoral work. So it is intended to give students increased research experience and also other things that I'll tell you about in a little bit in order to strengthen future applications to doctoral programs. And we have a master's in forensic mental health counseling, which is, it leads to license eligibility. I'll tell you a little bit more about it as we go along. The time to complete both of them is 2 years. And the main difference is that the 60-credit program, the forensic mental health counseling, does include 2 summer courses. The average class size for both programs is about 18 to 20 students, so it is fairly small. In our master's in forensic and legal psychology, students work with faculty in first in a directed research the first year. So that means that students join the research program that faculty have. We try to match students to faculty in as much as possible, but it is not as important as it is in doctoral programs. So the first year, students engage in research. It may or may not be exactly what they're interested in, but it gives practical experience in research. There's the expectation that the faculty and the student will produce something out of that year, either a conference presentation, a conference poster, perhaps even a manuscript if possible. And then the second year, the student works on their thesis. We do have some limited pay research practica sometimes during the second year. We are very well connected in Massachusetts and in Rhode Island, so primarily there's a program in Massachusetts that every once in a while, like actually right now, we have a student working there and she's getting paid, but it is dependent on research money that the people in that program, this is in the UMass, University of Massachusetts Medical School, whether they have grants or not. Next slide. All right. So the forensic and legal psychology curriculum, as you can see there, you have a variety of courses that prepare you for doctoral work. There are some changes here. We're in the process of updating the slides because we want to tailor the experience to make it the most helpful as possible. So the goal of the program is to provide you with a good background in forensic psychology, in psychology and law, in research, some assessment in order to understand the measures, and multicultural competence, and that one there's a clinical component but also a research component, and then other post-seminars in order to prepare you for doctoral work. And we have, again, 2 stats courses and research methods in order to prepare you not only for the thesis, but also for the future. The master's thesis is a core requirement for this program. And typically, students have presented either their directed research or their thesis work at nationals and regional conferences, and at times international conferences, primarily in Canada. I don't believe that anybody has gone to Europe, although a faculty member went with an undergrad student to Europe. So you can see there the different associations where we present at their conferences, and we do that with regularity. And you can see those are pictures of our students, all of who are in doctoral programs now, actually. Here, there are also photographs of students, former students that have presented at conferences. That's me in the top left. That's me with a student who just finished his doctorate in general psychology in Canada and is working for the Canadian government. We have students that typically present as a group, which makes the presentation less nerve-wracking. Also of note is that on the lower left, the student, the second from the left, the young lady there, is actually an undergrad student. So what we do in our labs, we tend to have graduate and undergraduate students working together. And for our graduate students, it becomes a place where they can work and kind of like perhaps supervise, mentor a little bit the undergrad students. So that's a nice experience as well. So this is an example of, again, that photo may look familiar from the previous slide, but this is a group of students that presented in Philadelphia, and the presentations were very successful. One about views of the death penalty, but also others presented on things about spirituality and mindfulness. And the 2 young ladies on the right, both of them with gray tops, those are undergraduate students that were working with graduate students as well. So that's another view. We have 2 lines of research for the directed research and for the thesis. And one is more forensically oriented, and the other one is more legal oriented. So examples of forensic research, you can see there the titles of a number of these research projects. There are some that have for example, the second one, ethnic racial bias is present in sex offender sentencing. The student in their committee, there was a professor from the law school in order to help out with the legal, the sentencing aspect of the research, and the exploration of risk factors associated with multiple and fatal opioid overdoses. A member of the committee, and the data that the student used was in criminal justice. So we try to facilitate the students being able to use as many of the resources that we have in the university to complete their desired project. Another example right now, I have a student who is going to partner with the School of Justice Studies so that he can get data from police officers about domestic violence calls. And also a faculty member from Justice Studies is going to be in his committee. So we try to do that as well in order to ensure that the students have as rich experience as possible. Now, for the legal research, we have a couple of faculty that focus more on juror perceptions, prosecutorial misconduct, or witness identification. So you can see there some of the examples of these projects, and these projects tend to be more experimental. So students have created projects where they manipulate what kind of like scenarios the participants are exposed to, and then they make comparisons. Now, on the case of the forensic mental health counseling, this program is 60 credits, and it does involve field work starting in the spring semester of the first year. So the first semester, students get coursework on helping relationships and beginning to think about clinical work. And then in the spring, students begin, and that's usually about 8 hours a week. So that boils up to about 200 hours for the spring term and the summer. And then during the second year, the students up their hours to about 20 hours, 2.5 days per week, and they accrue about 600 hours. And this tends to be a good hourly number for many states. Rhode Island actually is kind of weird and doesn't require this number, but Massachusetts does. So this program is designed for students that want a terminal master's, and they want to practice after getting their master's and eventually become licensed as licensed mental health counselors. Now, this doesn't mean that the person is licensable right after graduating, because states require additional supervised experience after getting their degree before the person is eligible to sit for the exam and then obtain their license. However, employers are aware of this. So basically what happens is that people are hired because they're license eligible, and they're expected to gain the license as they work. So it's not, so people are getting paid and working, and also working towards licensure. And as I said before, there's summer work between the first and second year. And what we are doing this coming summer are 2 online hybrid courses. So students will primarily do the course online, but they will meet with a faculty member over the course of that summer term, which is 5 weeks. And we are in the evening. And we're doing that because typically students work during the summer, because that's a reality. People need to work. And also because students are in their placements. So we want the days to be as free as possible, so that the students are able to do the work, make some money, because school is expensive and things cost money. And also so that they can work on their placement. And typically in the summer, students do more than the 8 hours that are expected in order to gain more experience. And that is very beneficial for afterwards. And this is what the curriculum looks like. And again, we have been around for 13 years, but we are not static. So we tweak things as needed in order to be updating, in order to be up to date with the needs from our students. So as students going to begin to go into certain states, and we see that there's a need for a particular course, then we will answer that. So for example, we have a number of states require a course on trauma. So we have added that. And so it's sort of like an elective that is not really an elective at this point, because a lot of students have it. And actually, anybody doing psychotherapy needs to be aware of how to treat trauma. So you can see there, the first year is very heavy. One thing that I gotta tell you is very different from undergrad. You are expected to read a lot. You are expected to write a lot. And, so you do have 5 courses, and you do have a lot of work. and you're expected to read. And you know, students are able to do it. We have plenty of students that also hold jobs, and it is doable. It is not doable if somebody has like a full-time job and does this as well. That's just, there's not enough time in the day, even if you need very little sleep. And then the second year, as you may notice there on the right, is a lot lighter because students are in their placement. And in the second year, all of the classes take place in the evening, again, because students are in different placements. And let me tell you a little bit about the, let me tell you about a little bit about the placements. We are somewhat unique in that we have relationship with many agencies where our students have interned in the past. And this is also a result of most of us in the faculty came from the field, having worked in some of these agencies. So we're able to offer this information to our students. However, we cannot guarantee that a student, any particular student, will get exactly the placement that they want, okay? So it's the luck of the draw sometimes. Sometimes students' interests vary so much that everybody gets their first choice. And sometimes, like this year, many people have the same interest. So, you know, the early birds got the worm, and the other students are looking into other choices that they may not have thought about. Now, the way to think about this is that when you're getting a master's, any experience is valuable. It doesn't mean that you will do that for the rest of your life. It gives you skills that you will use in subsequent placements and in subsequent jobs. So what we do is that we have contacts, and students contact the individuals at these agencies, and then they set up interviews, you know, send resumes, set up interviews. They go through the interview process, and then decide who they take. As you can see there, we have typically the placements are at most about an hour away. But most of them are also a little bit closer in Providence or somewhere else in Rhode Island or Southeastern Mass. And there you can see some of the different electives that we have had over time. There are things that are that we're requiring now. We have moved to do that, like methods of psychotherapy too, as well as law and mental health, in order to prepare everybody into doing work with these particular populations. I should say that our placements or the placements where we put our students, there are some that are correctional, there are some that are formally forensic, and there are others that are more kind of like generally clinical or clinical with court-ordered individuals. And an example, and they're always, we're always like getting additional ones. For example, one of our faculty members just got a $250,000 grant to study substance abuse among teenagers, I believe, involved with the justice system. And they're going to be looking for a student to work with them, providing individual, group, and in home-based therapy. So those are exciting opportunities that come up as well, in addition to the placements that we have. And our placements have been 99% very happy with us, so that we have not lost a placement. Some of our placements have hired our students upon graduation. And actually, at this point, we have a number of alumni that are supervising current students. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the faculty. These are generally faculty that have something to do with the graduate programs, whether it is kind of like a core faculty in the program or a little bit more kind of like a peripheral faculty member. And you can review our vitas in our website. I'll invite you to do that so that you can see what we're up to. So we have Garrett Berman, who's an applied legal psychologist and primarily focuses on eyewitness identification. So he's one of our 2 applied legal psychologists. Dr. Brooks focuses on multicultural issues, sexuality, prejudice, and she teaches one course, post-seminary in social psych, and but she has taken the students for research in the past if the interests align. We have Dr. Kate, who is also an attorney, and she offers a number of classes and also supervises clinical experience. Actually, I should say that in the clinical placement, students get supervision in their placement, but they also get additional supervision in the university as part of the licensing requirements, so that, and we can talk about more professional issues and help students navigate things that may come up in their placements. Dr. Conrad is actually the one that I told you about that just got that big grant, actually from CVS, the pharmacy. She is a counseling psychologist that she focuses on substance abuse in particular. Dr. DiCataldo, he's a clinical forensic psychologist, and his current research focuses on violence risk assessments. And so particularly with those that have been transferred to adult court because of serious charges, usually murders. And he's a very active forensic psychology, and students tends to take students to evaluations so that they can get that experience as well. Next is me. I am a clinical forensic psychologist, and I focus primarily on sex offenders, but I also have been doing research on cultural factors or factors that affect psychological well-being among different ethnicities. And I also plan to get involved in researching masculinity, which is closely related to the sex offender field, but that's what I do. Dr. Platinia is our other applied legal psychologist, and she deals particularly with jury decision making, prosecutorial misconduct. For a number of years, she was a jury consultant. Actually, she was a jury consultant for the Tim McVeigh case, the Oklahoma City bomber. So she has a lot of tremendous experience, and she has been teaching our research methods class for the thesis track students, which is a hair-raising experience. But the feedback that students then give us once they are in a doctoral program is that the doctoral course on research methods isn't that scary after having taken Platinia's course. Dr. Tully teaches couple of courses. She's a clinical health psychologist, and her research focuses primarily on smoking cessation. Dr. Whitworth, he was the founder of the program. He's a clinical forensic psychologist as well. He teaches courses and provides clinical supervision, and his experience is more on the civil side of things, like disability evaluations. Dr. Sajcek, who is pictured here, given a class, he's a clinical forensic psychologist, and he teaches and provides clinical supervision as well. So what happens after our students graduate from us? These are some examples of places where our students have gone to work. The first one, the Massachusetts Treatment Center for Sexually Dangerous Persons. We have students there doing both helping with evaluations, one type of evaluation actually, and then we have students doing treatment, kind of like intake evaluations for the treatment program there. And this is both with people serving sentences, as well as civilly committed sex offenders. The Ritz, the Rhode Island Training School, it is not the fancy hotel that has a Z. Ours is an S, and it's basically a jail for juveniles, both male and female. We have students there. The Department of Correction has actually a number of internship opportunities. So we have had students there working in their sex offender program, in their general mental health program, as well as in the women's program. But they also have a parole probation program, and also a oh my God, it's left me, a kind of like preparing for discharge program. There you go. All right, and other places, and some of them are general mental health programs like Newport Counseling, South Bay Mental Health, Arbor Mental Health. Those are general clinical programs as well. An example of a somewhat unique experience, but that one of our alumna has is Rebecca Schneider. She graduated when she in a number of years. Actually, it's going to be about 4 years, and she was in our old program, so we weren't divided at that point. So we were a 45 credit program that was either clinically focused or thesis focused. And she was clinically focused, and she worked in the university, I believe, in the university system dealing with sexual assaults, if memory serves right. And after us, she went to work for a college in Maine in their sexual assault services. And then she got a job, and she also worked, I believe, with the DA's office in Rhode Island as part of her placement with us. And then she went to work for the DA's office in the state of Michigan, and she was as a victim advocate, and she was the victim advocate for the 156 women that were involved in the Larry Nassar case. She came to talk to us about it actually last May, as our graduation speaker for the graduation. So very, very interesting experience. Now, of those that pursued doctoral study, we have, those are an example of the universities. These are for PhDs. We also have a number of students, sometimes thesis students, and but more often than not, FMHC students, the forensic mental health, that pursue PsyD degrees because they want to do clinical work, but they don't want to do research. So the ones that have gone on to get doctorates, you can see there what universities they have gone to. We have a number who have gotten doctorates in applied psychology, social psychology, sometimes other funky ones like quantitative psychology or general psychology. We do have some that have gotten into clinical programs. It is tremendously difficult to get into clinical programs. So those who have, some have gone directly from us, and others have continued working as a research assistant in order to get more publications, in order to then, and then they apply later on for PhDs in clinical. And the picture there, that's the picture there, I should tell you, you saw that guy before on the right. That's the student who graduated from a university in Canada, that's Carleton University. And next to him in the green and red is his research mentor there. And that that guy over there with the bow tie is one of the he's a world-renowned criminologist who developed risk assessment for sexual offenders. And the reason why they worked together was that the student and I went to a conference, a national conference for sex offender researchers and treatment providers. and they ended up meeting at a student event, and the student and I were working with the guy's measure, and they struck a conversation, and before you know it, he had wonderful GREs, but the networking really helps. So that's why we strive to take students to conferences in order for their work to become more visible, because those connections become very important when people send applications for doctoral programs. All right, and I believe that's all for me. I have to leave. It's my wife's birthday, so we're gonna go out. So I bid you goodbye. You can find me, my contact information is gonna be there at the end. Do not hesitate to ask me any questions, email me. I will answer you within a day or two at the most. Okay, so don't hesitate to email me with questions. Okay, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Alejandro. Have a good one.
Okay, thanks, you too.
Hi, everybody. I'm back. I'm Marcus. I'm the Director of Graduate Admission. I saw a few of you joined a little bit late. If you decide that you're going to apply, or maybe you already have, we require, obviously, an online application. It's through our website at grad.rwu.edu. It's on our next screen here, so you don't have to write that down. We require a $50 application fee, but we're going to waive that for you as a thank you for your coming tonight. So write down that code you see at the bottom of your screen in yellow. It's GRC Web, and that will waive your $50 fee. We also require your official college transcripts. We have to have transcripts from each of the schools that you've attended, so make sure you request them even if you only did a semester at a particular school or completed an associate's degree. We do need to see all of your transcripts. Now, both of these programs require 3 letters of recommendation. We'll get into these a little bit more in depth. It's a little bit different for each program, so I'll talk about that in a moment. We also require a letter of intent. And this is an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about what you want to do in the program, why you're a good student for us to consider, what kind of contributions you'll make, if you're doing research, talking about your research interests and so on. Again, I'll talk more in depth about that. GRE scores, we do require the standard GRE. So if you're familiar with the GRE or even the SAT when you came into college, there is a standard GRE that's the basic test, and then there are subject tests. There's a psychology GRE that we do not require. So you only need to submit the standard GRE scores to us, and you can have them submitted directly to us through the ETS portal. If you're applying for the forensic and legal psychology program, we require a research sample. And that's really what we're looking for is a junior research proposal or an actual research project. Most of you will be applying, obviously, in the beginning of your senior year, unless you've already graduated. And so a junior research proposal will suffice. The ideal submission will be something that shows what kind of survey instrument you're using, what your methods are, your intended sample, and so on. So there's actually some empirical research that you're going to be employing through that work. So we're not looking for a literature review where you've actually just compiled research from other sources, but instead actually conducting your own research project. So that's the ideal. And we understand not every student has that option. If you're earlier in your academic career, and we often talk to students that are maybe sophomores or juniors, and they have the option of pursuing research later on, I would strongly encourage you to do that if you're thinking about going on to a PhD in the long run, or you like research and want to get some more experience. That foundation is critical both for research-oriented master's programs and for your PhD programs. So definitely take advantage of that option if you have it. While we don't require interviews, I strongly encourage students to talk with the faculty. We can set something up for you. There's a lot of students don't realize there's a lot of value in connecting with us here in admissions and with the faculty in terms of your admission. And the reason for that is, I'll give you an example. We had a student that we met at a conference, this is a couple of years ago, and I happened to have our former program director with us at a table where we were it was like a college fair there. And the student had applied, and on paper, the student was not a very strong student. Her GPA wasn't very good. Her GREs were average at best. And so if she had just applied on paper like that, she likely would have been denied based on how they had denied other students that year. But because they met her, this particular student was able to talk to the faculty and talk about her research interests and what she really wants to do in the program. And that interaction led my program director to turn to me and say, I want her in my program. And I said, well, you realize, her GREs and her GPA aren't as strong. She said, I don't care. She's a great student. She has a lot of interests that align well with our research, and she would be a great research candidate in our program. So that interaction is what opened that door for her. So I always encourage students, take advantage of the opportunities, whether it be over Skype or in person. We would love to set that up for you, and I think it gives you a good opportunity to kind of sell yourself and your interests in ways that paper really just doesn't do it for your application. So definitely do that if you can. So quickly about your letters of recommendation. Both programs, again, require 3 letters. The Forensic and Legal Psychology program, the research-oriented program, requires all academic letters. So we want all 3 of your letters to come from academic sources, professors, research advisors, and so on. If you want to submit a 4th or 5th letter, which some students will opt to do, if you've done an internship or done some relevant work, then an internship supervisor or something is certainly welcomed if you've had that kind of an experience, but not as one of your primary 3 letters. Now that said, for students applying for the Forensic Mental Health Counseling program, since that is an applied program, it's appropriate to have both professors and professional sources, like internship supervisors or work supervisors, to write your letter. So you can have a mix of them for the mental health counseling program. It goes without saying, but you really need to pick recommenders who can speak to who you are and what you bring to the classroom. I've had students over the years that have sent us a letter that, or they've asked for a recommender, that the recommender submits us a letter that's maybe 4 or 5 sentences long, and it really doesn't help the candidacy at all for a student in that case. Often they sometimes read like, oh, I met this student in my freshman English class, and they seem like a great student, but I haven't talked to them since then, and I hope they do well. That's not going to help your candidacy. You really need to pick faculty who know you well, they know your aptitude, they know especially if you're going to a research program, talk about your research aptitude and your ability to do high quality research projects and your quantitative skills and so on. And if you've done any work experience, having a professional reference from somebody who can talk about your ability to handle conflict and your work ethic and maybe your time skills and how to communicate effectively. Those types of things are really critical as we're evaluating students for these programs. And you heard Dr. Leguizamo mention, I believe earlier on, the Forensic and Legal Psychology program takes between 8 and 10 students a year. So it's fairly competitive. It's a small program. We keep that deliberate because we want students to have high quality research experiences and align directly with faculty who are producing research on our campus. So we don't want you in an experience where you're struggling to get research opportunities. So we keep that program capped at 10. Our Forensic Mental Health Counseling program will take between 12 and 15 students typically per year. And again, most of those students are in the field, so that's why we have some more flexibility with the numbers of students able to get in. Your letter of intent, I've seen a lot of variance over the years on how students approach this. Some schools that you may be applying to will have prompts. They might have specific questions for you to answer. We deliberately leave it a little bit vague because we want to know a little bit more about you and give you the opportunity to show what's important to you as you're applying. So it's not a place to be providing an autobiography. So you shouldn't be talking about, I was born in such and such and grew up, and had these issues and whatever. What we're really looking for you to do is tell us more about who you are, kind of what makes you tick, why you want forensic psychology, what you want to do in the future, maybe what kinds of research you want to conduct. If there's a certain type of work placement you want in the mental health counseling program, for example, telling us what types of work you want to do are really helpful. Unfortunately, what we run into a lot with criminal justice and forensic psychology students is that often many students are encouraged or inspired to work in this field because they or someone they know have been involved in the criminal justice system in some way. Some students have been victims of crime, particularly things like sexual assault or domestic violence. Maybe they've had alcoholic parents. They've seen crime committed against a family member, or they might have somebody incarcerated in their family. Those are all important parts of your story, so we're not discouraging you from talking about them if you choose to. But in some cases, we've had students that we admire the courage that it takes to disclose something that may have been very painful for you in the past. But we've had students that have spent an entire 2 pages detailing a particular incident that happened to them. And again, we recognize that that's difficult and it was part of your story. And you know, one way to use that in a way that's effective in your letter of intent is saying, you know, unfortunately, I went through this experience in college or at the hands of whomever, or grew up with a family member that was violent or whatever that is. And I've been working on how I respond to that, and I've chosen to go into this field so that I can help others avoid those circumstances or help others respond to those circumstances. That's a very positive way of using that information, and it shows some maturity and growth on your part. Where it's not helpful is we've had, fortunately not very many, but 1 or 2 students over the years where they've detailed these types of experiences, and then they say they want to go into the field so they can take vengeance on the person who hurt them initially. And our faculty want to know that you're going into the field with the intentions of helping others and bettering the field and bettering the community, not with the intention on taking some sort of vengeance and a negative. So, so give us an opportunity to see who you are in your letter of intent, wherever that may take you. But help us see what you're going to bring to the classroom and ultimately be part of the student community here, especially when you're talking about only about 20 to 25 students total between the 2 programs a year. You can imagine you get to know everybody pretty well, and having a good mix of students there is important. So we really want to see you as a fit for our program, just as you want to select a school with the idea of finding the right fit for you. Now, standardized tests, we require the GRE I mentioned before. This is not something you want to blow off. When schools say they require the GRE, and I know there's been a lot of debate of late from a lot of schools, it is an indicator of success, both in our program and in PhD programs. So we do require it, and it is something you want to score well on. As you're thinking about master's or doctoral study, many of the students we work with are thinking about doctoral study either now or in the future. The GREs are really part of the kind of gatekeeping process for PhD programs. So often very competitive PhDs, particularly the clinical PhDs, will have hundreds or even thousands of applicants, and they use your GPA and your GRE as kind of the gate opener. So if you don't score a certain number on the GRE and a certain GPA, your application may be cut out of the pool entirely before you're ever even looked at beyond those 2 scores. Fortunately, at the master's level, we don't use that process. We look at your entire portfolio, and however, your GRE score and your GPA tend to be the largest chunk of the consideration for your admission here, particularly on the forensic and legal psychology program. And forgive me, my computer just went to sleep, so hopefully you didn't lose it on your side. So it is a very important piece of the puzzle, so you don't want to skip studying for the program. Now, my computer hopefully is coming back for everybody. I think you lost the screen, so I'm going to try to get that back for you. I think I'm back. So take the time to study. The content on the GRE is, a lot of it is, especially on the math sections, things that you might not have seen since high school, things like calculus and trigonometry and geometry. So definitely study those pieces. We find that the quantitative or the math section of the GRE is the most difficult for most of the psychology students. They typically do pretty well in the verbal and the writing sections, but the quantitative section tends to be the hardest part. Take advantage of practice tests online. There are some free ones that you can take through ETS. You see their website there. They're the Educational Testing Service. There's a couple free ones you can take there. You can also, if you want to, spend $49, and that gives you 2 full GRE exams that are fully scored for you as well. So not only can you sit and take the exam just as you would on test day, but you get feedback on all your answers and whether they were right or wrong and why. So that's that would cost a little bit of money. That's really that's kind of the best way to prepare if you don't want to invest significantly in a course. They do have some online courses that cost between $500 and $1,000. The self-paced course, I believe, is the cheaper one, and then you can go through a regular course, more $1,000, and you can see ones that are more expensive than that. I don't know that for most students the really expensive courses are necessary, but definitely study and do what feels right for you. Get one of the test books. I'm sure your career services offices or libraries have these books. You can also buy them on Amazon and take these practice tests. The practice tests are critical because not only do you get a sense of the content, but you also can get a feeling for the timing of questions in the exam, because you don't want that stress when you're on test day, worried about if you have enough time to answer the question. So if you have taken practice tests before, you'll get used to the format of the questions and how to answer them quickly, and understand how the time can really clamp down on you if you're not paying attention. So take those practice tests, and that'll really help you do well. And ultimately, not only are these important for getting into the program, but they're important for scholarships and financial aid considerations. So if you're, regardless of what program you're applying to, if you get a great GRE score and you have a good GPA, that'll open up scholarship opportunities for many programs. So definitely do as well as you can. And ultimately, if you go on to a PhD or PsyD down the line, they're going to require GREs as well. So if you do well now, and your scores are good for 7 years, you won't have to retake the exam. Occasionally, students will retake the exam once they're in a master's program so that they become more competitive for PhDs. So our regular application deadline is February 15th, but we have a priority deadline of February 1st. So if you're interested in being considered for scholarships, and I'll go into depth on what's available shortly, but scholarships or assistantships, you need to complete your application by February 1st. And this is February 1st of your senior year if you're in college currently and entering for the fall. If you're juniors, you have a little bit more time. Of course, those of you that are out working or graduated, you can apply anytime here before February 1st. But that's for your completed application. So all of your supporting materials have to be in along with your application form by that time. And because it's a deadline, and you'll see this with other programs, deadline programs typically are reviewed by committee. So we might do one early review in mid-January or so, but otherwise we'll send all of our completed applications over for February 1st, and we'll get decisions out to students by March 1st. So we have a month turnaround, and then we'll require a deposit if you choose to come in April. So we've got a little bit of flexibility. Be mindful of some programs that are going to force you to deposit earlier. You definitely want to think about ultimately the best fit programs for you, whether it's here or otherwise, and try not to be forced into a life decision because another school is saying, well, we need to hear from you within 2 weeks. And if that's the case, definitely talk to the schools that maybe haven't gotten back to you and see if you can get a response so that you have the best opportunity to make a decision that works for you rather than a school forcing your hand. But always call us and ask questions if we can help. So I mentioned a little bit about the numbers of students we're talking about. Again, about 8 to 10 students on the forensic and legal side and up to 15 on the mental health counseling side. We get about 130 to 140 applications a year for the programs collectively. So for 140 for about 20 to 25 spots. Now, granted, not every single student completes in that group, but over 100 do. And it is fairly competitive depending on the program. But the things that you want to keep in mind, I mentioned if you have the opportunity to connect with us, call us, talk to us. I mean, I know while it's not a formal part of the application process, if a student has called me regularly and demonstrated an interest, I can talk to Dr. Legisimo or some of the other faculty and say, this student is really passionate about getting into our program. That passion you can't, and just like the student that met us at that conference, you can't necessarily communicate that well necessarily in personal statement, although you can to some degree. But if you call us and you email us and you're attentive and you care about the process, that shows a level of interest that's different from somebody that, say, applies in the fall and then we never hear from them until decisions come out in the spring. So keep in touch with us, demonstrate your interest. If you can come to campus, we have visit grants that we can provide to you. So if you come and you ultimately enroll in the university, we'll provide, for most of you coming from further away, you're going to get $500 off your bill in the fall. So we are giving that to you as an acknowledgement for the fact that you took the time out to visit us. So that's important. So we encourage you to take advantage of that and come out and visit campus, because there's really nothing better than to actually step foot here and say, yeah, this feels comfortable, or it doesn't. And at every campus, you're going to have that feeling. That's kind of a gut instinct on if it's a good place for you, if you like the people, if you like the faculty. We want to make sure that you make the best decision for you. And if you have those answers and you've been to the campus, you can at least make a clear decision on whether we're a good fit institution for you or not. Now, I mentioned the 2 deadlines. Don't submit all of your materials on February 1st if you want to be considered. We know, if I don't have to convince most of you, if you've had psychology faculty before, which I know you all have, you know that they have a subconscious that's different than the rest of us. So if you're sending a subconscious signal on February 1st that we're not your top program, or you're not interested in the program, and you're just showing up maybe because you hadn't gotten into the PhD programs you originally applied for, that's a signal that I'm always cautious about, because faculty know, similar to what I was saying about who's been reaching out to us, faculty know who's visited, who's been talking to us regularly, who applied in November and has been working on their application for a long time and they're very interested in us, versus the students that just drop on our doorstep in February. So definitely not only meet the deadline, but apply sooner and make sure that you're demonstrating an interest sooner. And I think that's a subconscious piece that not every student is demonstrating at all of their institutions. So when you're applying, think about that with all the schools you're applying to. I mentioned the deadline review. We'll be doing that in a group and kind of assembling a class that way. And ultimately, if you're admitted, we'll ask for a commitment for your enrollment and things, so we can cross that bridge when we get to it. When you're thinking about costs for master's level education, it's a little bit different than what you'll run into with doctoral study, and I'll get into that in a second. One thing that we've run into with some of our competitive master's programs, many of the master's programs in forensic psych are in major cities. I'm sure you've seen that as you're looking at other programs. And I had a student call me a couple of years ago and said, oh, this program is $100 less per credit hour. They're so much cheaper than you are. And I said, well, how much is your housing going to be? And as she looked at where she was going to be living, it was triple the cost to live where she was going rather than coming here. So once she looked at the entire costs across all of her various expenses, she realized that it was more affordable to come here. Now, that math doesn't always work out. I'm not promising that we are the cheapest or most affordable option out there, but we are relatively affordable in terms of our competitive master's programs. So just when you're thinking about investing in, we know it's an investment for your time and your future, and it's debt in many cases for students. So we want to make sure you make the best decision. Sometimes paying an extra $100 credit hour gets you a better opportunity or a better program or a better job or a better research opportunity. So sometimes it's worth spending a little bit more money. But in many cases, that math doesn't always work out depending on where you're looking and what your related expenses will be. So I alluded to this in the last slide. When you're paying for graduate school, I talk to a lot of students that say, oh, grad school is paid for. And when you hear that, typically that's referring to PhD programs. And even then, that's not a universal truth. If you're applying to PhD programs and they have research assistantships available, most PhDs, especially any of you that are at public schools, you may have had teaching assistants in maybe your freshman or sophomore level classes teaching lectures. Those are often doctoral students that are doing that in return for often a full tuition or a portion of their tuition being covered and a scholarship or a stipend even. So we had a student, for example, that we just placed at the University of Wyoming in their applied legal psychology PhD program. She went through our forensic and legal program. She got a full tuition waiver and she got a $23,000 living stipend. So she got some great financials for that program. That's fairly common with research PhDs. It's not common at the master's level, and it's not common with PsyD programs either. So you have to kind of do your research and see what kind of financial opportunities will be there. Most graduate students at the master's level are paying for at least some of their schooling with federal financial aid. And federal financial aid for grad students is a little bit different because you no longer include your parents as part of that equation, so you get more money available to you in both a direct unsubsidized loan, which provides up to $20,500 a year, and then the PLUS loan, which any of you have taken a Parent PLUS loan in the past. Is no longer the parent portion, but you can essentially borrow all of the costs that you need for your tuition, your housing, your meals, your books, any related expenses while you have in school. Now, we're not encouraging you to overborrow, but you have that aid available to you. Obviously, we encourage you to look at programs like ours that have assistantships or scholarships as well, because for some of you, that will allow you to defer some of those costs so that you're not taking on more debt than you have to. Very few students tend to go into private loans because the federal loans are very competitive. You can take federal loans that you pay off over long periods of time. They have income-based repayment, so that if you're working in a job only making, say, $45,000 or $50,000 when you graduate, and then within a few years you're up to $70,000, the amount of your payment, will be lower as you start, and then gradually go up as you make more money, and that makes it a little bit more affordable for you. And not all programs have that, but the federal programs offer that to you. Plus, you can pay it over a long period of time, rather than many private loans will force you to repay within 5 or 10 years. So just to give you some quick overview of the aid that we offer here, if you're applying for the forensic and legal psychology program, we have 2 teaching assistantships available. Now, our grad students do not teach classes on their own. They are often mentoring or supporting research projects and things under the auspices of a full-time faculty member. So the full-time faculty member is teaching, and then they're supporting the class in different ways, or supporting students outside of class. Those pay a half tuition scholarship and offer you a $3,000 assistantship that gets paid at $15 an hour, so you get 200 hours working with the students and faculty. For a student that's particularly gifted in quantitative methods, math work and research, we will offer the institutional research assistantship. It's basically an administrative assistantship where you're helping develop reports and do data analysis for the university. And that has a quarter tuition scholarship, but an $8,000 assistantship, so you're getting significantly more hours and a payroll opportunity. One other position that we hire for every other year is our diversity research assistant. It's essentially similar to the institutional research job in that you're doing data analysis and work kind of connected with them, but specific to our diversity initiatives for the university. And we hire that student with a half tuition scholarship and a $3,000 assistantship, so similar to the other TAs that we offer. And then beyond that, we have some limited scholarships and grants that may be awarded, that we awarded to students often between $1,500 to typically $3,000, although some students have seen up to $5,000 depending on academic and GRE performance. So those are things that you may be considered for, but again, you have to apply for February 1st to be considered. On the forensic mental health counseling side, we don't offer any assistantships because, as you probably saw earlier, how heavy your course load is to start, and then you're in the field a lot. So you're spending a lot of hours working. So we aren't providing jobs on campus necessarily, at least not in assistantship capacities, for students that are in the forensic mental health counseling program. But we offer scholarships, and these scholarships are purely money off of your tuition. So we offer a half tuition scholarship each year, a series of quarter tuition scholarships, and then some smaller scholarships to really a number of our students, and that the majority, more than half of our students, have gotten something in the last several years, so there's opportunities for that. And some students will, I can think of one student that's in the forensic mental health counseling program that she's got a couple of on-campus jobs. They're just purely payroll jobs. She works with our dining services, and we've got a student working with IT. So there are opportunities to do that as well, but they aren't academically connected for assistantships, but they're money in your pocket, so that you have some options there. I mentioned the travel grants if you decide to come and visit campus before you enroll. So that's pretty much anywhere between now and May. We'll provide a travel grant for you up to $500. Most of you will qualify for the $500, and it's really just based on distance you're coming from campus. And that would be given to you off your bill if you come in the fall. And basically all of our assistantships and scholarships, aside from these grants, depending on when you come, will be awarded when you're admitted to the program. So you'll find out about that in March or April as you've been admitted. So that's it for me. I know we went a couple of minutes over, although I think we started a few minutes late, so we stayed within our hour. This is the contact information that we have for Dr. Leguizamo as well as myself. I'm happy to answer any questions you have now. I'll stay on as long as needed. As I mentioned, if you're on your mobile device, there's a questions box in the lower portion of your screen, and on the right-hand side of your screen if you're on a desktop, and you can enter any questions that you might have there, and I'm happy to answer them. I see there's a question about living in the area. Where we're located, we're in Bristol, Rhode Island, so we're about an hour from Boston and a half hour or so from Providence. We're right on the water, so we're a small town where we are. It's a historic town. We have the oldest continuously running 4th of July parade here, so it's a neat community. And there's a number of waterfront towns around us that students will live in. It's a very kind of quaint and quiet and safe series of communities around here. Just south of us, just over the bridge, is Aquidneck Island. If you've heard of Newport, Rhode Island, which is regarded as kind of the yachting capital of the world, and there's a lot of mansions there, and there's the famous Cliff Walk. If you've ever come here, that's kind of a touristy favorite place for people to go. We have a lot of beaches. That's all right over on the island, just over the bridge from us. So a lot of students will live in Portsmouth, which is right over the bridge, or even Middletown. Some will live in Newport. Newport's about a 25-minute drive. Middletown's about 15 minutes, and Portsmouth is anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes or so, depending on what part of town you're in. And then we're only a stone's throw from Massachusetts, so some of our students will live just over the border in Massachusetts. There's some more industrial buildings that have been rehabbed into apartments and condos, so students are living there. But we have a great housing resource website that shows you all the types of opportunities we have here with maps and the transportation. If you don't have a car, there is a bus line that stops right here at campus and goes all the way to Providence and as far south as Newport and all around the region. So you don't necessarily have to have a car. If you're in the forensic mental health counseling program, we strongly encourage you to have a car only because you'll have your clinical placements and it's much easier to get around and get to your placements if you have your own transportation. We also have a question regarding student life on campus. And so what we have our new Graduate Student Association, which actually just started this year. And that's been exciting because we've done a few happy hours, which is just fun to get students connected. The psychology program brings in guest lectures. They actually do monthly brown bag sessions. So they'll do a lot of things about like preparing for applying to PhD programs, or they might talk about something that's very topical, maybe in legal psychology. Then we've done, across all of our graduate programs, our students participate in the Grad Student Association, and we went to Come From Away, which is a Broadway musical at the Providence Performing Arts Center in December before everybody went away for break. We're going to Fiddler on the Roof in February, which is also a Broadway musical. We have tickets for the Providence Bruins hockey team, and we'll be going the second week of February. We're going to Blue Man Group coming up in Providence in April. We'll probably go into the Boston Red Sox in the end of April, right before our students graduate. So there's a lot of great activities in this area. We're only an hour from Boston. We're about 2.5 hours from New York City. So we're in a prime location between a lot of major cities, but yet you have the access to cities where you're close, in a quiet community here where you can really focus on your studies. And students love all the kind of smaller restaurants and the shopping and all the water activities and paddle boarding and kayaking and so on. And students can actually just bring their ID down to our sailing center and take out kayaks and paddle boards if they want to do that on campus. So it's a pretty fun location, and we have a lot to offer. So are there any other questions that I can answer for you at this point? As I mentioned, and Dr. Leguizamo mentioned, you can reach out to us at any time. We're happy to help answer any questions you have, set up a visit, set up an interview, and so on. So just let us know. It looks like there aren't any further questions right now, so thank you again for coming. We appreciate your time this evening, and we hope that we can see you on campus soon and maybe in your application. So have a nice evening.